Welcome to the So That's Why podcast, where we unpack the science behind everyday questions. I'm Jen.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Matt.
Right, so picture the scene. You're in a meeting. It's not a terrible meeting, and you're not even that tired. And then someone across the table yawns. And within about 5 seconds, you feel it creeping up on you. Your jaw stretches, your eyes are watering. Why do we yawn, and why on earth is it so contagious?
Yeah, and hands up, how many people listening to this are yawning now, right? Why does trying hard not to yawn somehow make the whole thing 10 times worse?
Yeah.
Right? I once spent an entire presentation basically vibrating with some kind of suppressed yawns, jaws clenched, my eyes streaming, whilst all trying to look completely engaged.
Yeah, we've all been there. And the science here is genuinely fascinating. I know I always say that, but this really is genuinely fascinating.
This time it is.
Absolutely. Because what most people think is happening when they yawn is almost entirely wrong.
So by the end of this episode, you'll understand why yawning has very little to do with boredom and everything to do with what's happening inside your brain. Though that doesn't make it any less awkward when it happens mid-sentence in a meeting.
And the actual reason turns out to be something most people would never guess, which is exactly the kind of thing we just want to tell somebody else about, right, immediately.
Okay, so let's start with what actually happens during a yawn, because it's more complex than just opening your mouth wide. So everyone is familiar with the process, aren't we? You know, your jaw drops, your mouth opens wide, you take in a long, slow breath, your eardrums stretch, your eyes might close, you might tear up. Who's yawning yet?
Yeah.
And often there's a whole body stretch reflex accompanying it. You know, it's actually got a technical term. That whole full sequence is called pandiculation.
Pandiculation. That's such a good word, isn't it? I didn't even know my eardrums could stretch. And now I'm learning about pandiculation. I'm going to try and work that into a conversation at least once this week and see if anyone notices.
Yep, good luck with that. What's particularly interesting is that it's semi-involuntary. So it's triggered by your nervous system. And once it kind of begins, you genuinely can't stop it midway through. And researchers have identified that at least 7 distinct physiological steps are in that sequence.
7 coordinated steps to open your mouth. The question is, my body massively overcomplicating basic tasks here?
Yeah, right. But do you know what? There's a formal study of yawning, and it even has its own name.
Drum roll.
Cosmology.
Cosmology.
Yeah, because,
cosmologist.
Doctor of Yawning doesn't sound quite as good as Doctor of Cosmology, does it? But it's a legitimate scientific field, which gives you a sense that researchers in this field take this rather more seriously than the rest of us do.
They certainly do. And the most persistent misconception with yawning is the oxygen theory. So the idea that we yawn because our blood levels drop or the carbon dioxide level in the blood builds up, and that big inhale is kind of correcting it. That explanation has been comprehensively disproved.
So there was a key study published in the Journal for Physiology and Behavior, and researchers, they manipulated the oxygen and carbon dioxide content of the air that participants were breathing in, and they measured whether it changed the yawning frequency, and guess what? It didn't at all.
It did not.
No.
So the oxygen explanation then is completely wrong, and yet it's probably the most common answer I would have given anyway. And it's a great example, I suppose, of a fact that survives purely on confidence.
Mm.
And so if it's not oxygen, you're probably wondering what is actually going on. And now the leading theory is that it centres on brain temperature regulation. So your brain operates best within a very narrow temperature window, and yawning appears to be one of its mechanisms for staying within that range.
Yeah, and there's a researcher at Princeton University, and he published work showing that when people held warm packs to their foreheads, the number of times that they yawned, it significantly increased. But when they held cool packs to their heads, that number dropped dramatically, even below baseline.
Yeah, and the mechanism of this is pretty elegant. So That deep inhale during a yawn draws cooler air across the palate, which sits directly beneath the brain, while the stretching of the jaw muscles increases local blood flow. And both of these effects work together to cool the tissue around the brain.
So it's basically a built-in cooling fan, like a car radiator for the brain. So I'm going to be thinking about that every time I yawn now.
It also explains something that you may or may not know, depending upon your background, but athletes often yawn in the changing room just before they compete. And that's their brains are ramping up, getting focused and anticipating the physical demands that are about to happen. And their body is already one step ahead by triggering that cooling.
Yeah, so from the athletes to the rest of us, I mean, I'm not saying we're not all athletes, of course. There's also consistent evidence of increased yawning during transitions between sleep and wakefulness. So both times are when the brain's temperature and alertness levels are changing quickly. So yawning seems to be the way of your brain recalibrating.
Okay, so the big morning yawn and stretch isn't just a cliche. It's your brain requesting a recalibration before it actually has to think properly, I suppose. That's quite relatable, isn't it?
And did you know it actually starts remarkably early? So ultrasound imaging shows yawns in fetuses of around 11 weeks gestation. At that point, their lungs aren't even functional, so it can't be about breathing. Instead, it's thought to help jaw muscle development and regulate brain fluid dynamics from a really early stage.
That's really cool. That's really amazing, isn't it? Babies doing biology homework in the womb. That is amazing. Yeah.
And it's a good reminder that yawning is doing something genuinely fundamental. It's not just kind of filling time during a slow afternoon.
Okay, so let's get to the part everyone wants to know about, contagious yawning. And fair warning, even talking about yawning in a studio is probably triggering some of you listening to us right now.
I know, I'm totally stifling the yawn. Stop.
I like how you said fair warning. Like we're halfway through the podcast.
So contagious yawning is really well documented and remarkably widespread. So it's been observed in humans, of course, but also chimpanzees, wolves, dogs, even parakeets. So yawning clearly goes beyond a simple involuntary reflex in humans.
I love that. A parakeet yawning, catching yawns from each other. That's like, well, let's just say that's probably the most unexpected fact I've heard today.
They are, and what's really interesting is that in social animals, contagious yawning, it seems to have like a synchronizing effect, so it helps align the alertness or the brain state of everyone in the group.
Yeah, and in humans, contagious yawning is thought to involve mirror neuron systems. So it's the same neural circuitry that underlies empathy and social imitation. So when you hear, see, or even read about someone yawning, part of your brain simulates the experience, which then triggers the reflex itself.
I can feel my jaw go.
Don't start yawning, because you can't actually watch someone yawn without feeling it, can you? And you're going to set us all off. And apparently, like you say, you can't even read the word yawn without your jaw starting to get its own ideas. And like you guys now, I'm just fighting a yawn. Just take the camera off me is probably the best way.
But, you know, the research actually supports that experience. So one study in a psychology journal, it looked at whether people's susceptibility to contagious yawning was linked to their empathy scores. So they found a positive connection. The more empathetic people said they were, the more likely they were to catch a yawn.
They did, and it was so interesting. But it's worth being a bit careful with the link, because on the flip side, a Duke University study with over 300 participants found that while age and time of the day had stronger effects on contagious yawning than expected, the empathy correlation was less consistent than earlier, smaller studies have suggested. So it's a bit of a mixed bag of results so far.
So the empathy link may be real, but more modest than the headlines made it sound, which is a pattern that comes up regularly, doesn't it, when smaller psychology findings get replicated at a larger scale.
Okay, so translation then, you can reliably tell... you can't reliably tell anything meaningful about someone based on whether they yawned back at you.
Well, you say that. There's some really interesting research on exactly that front. So a study published in 2015 looked at individuals with higher psychopathic traits and found they are significantly less susceptible to contagious yawning than those without those psychopathic traits.
And that finding was followed up by even more research, which found that people scoring higher on psychopathy measures, they showed reduced contagious yawning even after controlling for variables like sleep quality or age.
So basically, if you're completely unmoved while everyone around you is yawning, either you've slept brilliantly or you might want to take yourself off and have a quiet word with yourself.
So, to be clear, as a total disclaimer, not catching a yawn doesn't diagnose anything and it doesn't make you a psychopath. And there is significant individual variation regardless. But what this thing does do is add another data point to a growing body of research linking certain social reflex responses to empathy.
And there's also something interesting about why we suppress yawning in social situations, because there's actually no biological benefit to it. You know, fighting a yawn gives you jaw tension without giving you any of the cooling effect.
Which makes a lot of sense if you've been in the meetings where I've, sat and you can't yawn. You spend so much of your energy not doing it, don't you? And that you've actually got nothing left to focus on the meeting with.
Yeah.
Which is exactly it. So most of what's socially uncomfortable about yawning is purely the context. So in a meeting, it can read as being disengaged. But as Jen said, in a sports changing room before a match, it apparently reads as like focused preparation. So the biology is identical in both cases.
Which means the only thing that actually changed is the room you walked into in those two things. Your brain is doing exactly the same thing in both places, completely indifferent to how it looks.
But I think it is also worth covering when yawning becomes a signal worth paying attention to. You know, occasional yawning is completely normal. I saw that yawn, Chris.
I was trying
Stop
my best
it.
to stifle the yawn.
Yeah.
But
We're obviously not psychopaths. That's the main
no,
thing.
that's good. Occasional yawning, like I said, is completely normal, but excessive yawning, particularly when it's unprompted by tiredness or boredom, that can sometimes be associated with conditions like migraines, epilepsy, or in rarer cases, cardiac or neurological events.
That's it. And the mechanism there involves the thermoregulatory and autonomic nervous system disruption that accompanies those conditions. It's the brain triggering its temperature management responses more frequently as a result of a kind of broader physiological stress.
So excessive, out of nowhere yawning is genuinely worth mentioning to your doctor, is what we're saying, which is one of those things, I don't know, maybe you want to bring up at the next appointment.
Exactly. It's not something to catastrophize over, but it's a reminder that yawning is a genuine physiological signal rather than just an embarrassing habit.
I guess it's a bit like how your body uses pain as a signal, right? You don't ignore it entirely, but you also don't panic every time your knee aches after a long walk.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. So context is everything. And most of the time yawning is just your brain quietly going about its business, which is the much more likely explanation when it happens and there's something more serious.
So when you put all of that together, it's actually a pretty different picture of yawning than most people start with. Certainly I did. It's your brain doing active housekeeping, regulating temperature, it's managing state transitions and potentially synchronizing with the people around you. It's not a sign of laziness or rudeness, even if those things can sometimes trigger it.
Yep, and that reframe is pretty useful, to be fair, because I think most people spend a lot of energy feeling embarrassed about something that their brain is just kind of quietly getting on with in the background.
Yeah, and you know, like everything, the more you understand what's driving it, the less it feels like something happening to you and more like something your body's doing for you. You know, and the sleep connection, surprise, surprise, is worth flagging too. You know, sleep deprivation, that increases yawning frequency, which ties directly into what we've covered in previous episodes on sleep quality and cognitive performance. You know, well-rested brains work so much better.
Have we talked about sleep before on this podcast?
I don't know, we might have.
Might have figured that. But if you find yourself yawning more than usual and nothing else has changed, it's worth asking whether your sleep has taken a bit of a hit. Not as something to stress about, just as useful information your body is handing over to you.
Yeah, and that's probably the most practical takeaway of all of this. Like, yawning is a readout. It's telling you something about your brain state and how well rested you are. And most of the time, it's completely benign. But it is worth noticing and keeping an eye on.
So next time you're in a meeting, right, and you feel a yawn building, you're not being rude, which is a wonderful thing. You're performing precision brain cooling. That's a much better way to look at it. And it should be maybe something we should be allowed to say out loud.
Absolutely. And it really is that fundamental. So yawning is one of the most observed behaviours across vertebrates. It exists in fish, in reptiles, in birds, in mammals. We talked about parakeets. That tells you it's solving a genuinely important problem, not just a quirk of human biology.
So that's why we yawn and why it's contagious. Yawning mainly helps regulate brain temperature. Your nervous system brings in cooler air across the palate and boosts blood flow to keep the brain working at its best. Contagious yawning taps into the same brain networks that handle empathy and imitation, which is why just seeing, hearing, or even thinking about a yawn can set you off on one.
And it starts in the womb. It works across different species, and it has nothing to do with oxygen levels, despite that being the explanation that most of us have carried for our entire lives.
Yeah, so your brain is just hot sometimes. So it cools itself down, which is very reassuring.
It is indeed. You can all yawn now safely. So that's it for this week. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're going to keep unpacking the science behind everyday questions. Tell us in the comments what you'd like us to explore. Thanks for geeking out with us. But for now, that's it from me.
That's it from me.
And that's it from me.
Bye for now.